Oh wait, before I get into the news exactly, I want to remind you guys that on tomorrow, Saturday, August 26th, there will be a foster care celebration at Benchmark Family Services, 5525 Broadway, where you can learn more about foster care, interact with the staff. You can meet other foster parents and have food, fun, and family. Uh, if you see my guy Che Grafton, tell him I said what's happening out there. But remember, Benchmark Family Services, 5525. They're having a foster care celebration with food, family, and fun. I'm guessing it will be all day because I'm not seeing any time here. But please come on out. Come on out, say what's up to my guy Che. But now let's get to the news before we get into the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his epic speech. I wanted to get into a news story that I feel like, once again, the mainstream corporate, mostly liberal media avoided this entire week, which they should feel great shame about. President Joe Biden used multiple pseudonyms during his vice presidency to hide some of his communications from that period, including some involving Ukraine policy and his son, Hunter Biden. Now remember, Biden was the point person on Ukraine when he was the vice president under Barack Obama. That's why this is an issue. And his son, at the same time, was on the board of a corrupt energy company called Burisma at this same time. So the House Oversight Committee has asked the National Archives on Thursday for communications involving 3 of Joe Biden's aliases: Robert Peters, Robin Ware, and J.R.B. Ware. J.R.B. Ware. That sounds like a wrestler's name. Like, Shivani, it's J.R.B. Ware. And he's got a chair. The committee sought correspondence between those aliases, Hunter Biden, and 2 of his former business partners, Eric Schwerin and Devin Archer. We talked about Devin Archer a few weeks ago on this show when he said that Joe Biden indeed was on some of the calls and actually met Devin Archer, who's a convicted felon now, was a convicted criminal, and one of Hunter Biden's corrupt business buddies. Only emails involving the aliases and Hunter Biden are presently public due to the publication of the contents of a laptop he abandoned in a Delaware repair shop. Several of those messages suggest that Hunter Biden was looped in on preparations his father, in his capacity as vice president, was making for talks with Ukrainian officials in 2016. At the time, Hunter Biden was working on behalf, he's on the board of a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma, like we just talked about. In one message from May of 2016, Hunter was copied on an email to his father from a staff member who was reminding the then vice president that the following morning he would huddle with staff before a phone call with then Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. Hunter Biden was not frequently looped into such emails about his father's schedule. His inclusion on scheduling emails with Robert Peters, which was his father's pseudonym at the time, appeared to happen on just a handful of dates that correspond to the developments with Ukraine policy. Like I said, Joe Biden was the point person on Ukraine. When we overthrew their government in 2014, right, we were a part of the Maidan coup that happened. See, the mainstream media has presented this narrative that Vladimir Putin is just some crazy guy who wanted to take over Ukraine. That's not what happened. You know, this has been going on for decades, and particularly with Ukraine since 2014, when we really helped overthrow Ukraine's government and sort of helped place a puppet in office. How do I know this? Because you can hear audio of Victoria Nuland from the State Department talking about it. You can hear there's actually audio leaked of her talking about who they're going to put in place to be Ukraine's new president, you know. And they were actually thinking about one of the Klitschko brothers. I've talked about them on the show before. The Klitschko brothers are two legendary heavyweight boxing champions. Vladimir Klitschko is the second longest reigning heavyweight champion in boxing history, after only Joe Louis. Really, he would have broken Joe Louis's record if he had not lost to Tyson Fury in 2015. So he's a Hall of Famer. Both brothers are Hall of Fame boxers, heavyweight champions, two of the better Hall of Fame boxers of all time, and they have gone into politics. And the U.S. government was thinking about maybe one of them could be the president, but they decided against it. And at that point, so we essentially fomented a soft coup to create this sort of situation, this tenuous situation. We funded Nazis in Ukraine who were shelling much of eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region, and killing, I think they've killed over 14,000 mostly Russian-speaking Ukrainians over the last decade, before this conflict sort of really went hot last year, super hot last year, and Putin just out and out invaded. So that's what this is about. At the same time all this is going on, during the Obama era, Joe Biden is basically the point man on the policy for Ukraine at this point from the U.S. government's perspective, and his son is making millions of dollars in Ukraine. Making millions of dollars off of being Joe Biden's son in Ukraine. So a lot of people will say, well, you know, Joe Biden had nothing to do with this. You can't prove Joe Biden had anything to do with any of this. You can't prove anything. But here's what we can prove. We can prove that the policy that Joe Biden pushed certainly looks very suspicious in the light. Like, the Obama administration had signed off on $1 billion for Ukraine. But when this prosecutor named Victor Shokin started looking into Burisma, which was the corrupt energy firm that Hunter worked for, where he had basically a no-show job and was selling access to his father as the vice president and the point person on Ukraine, Joe Biden actually waged a pressure campaign to force Victor Shokin from office. So this prosecutor who was looking into Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine was forced out of his job by Joe Biden. Why would Joe Biden do that if he had absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about here? Now, Devin Archer, who we just talked about as one of Hunter Biden's corrupt business buddies, he said that Victor Shokin was a threat. He was a threat to the natural gas company Burisma Holdings, which had paid Hunter Biden up to $1 million per year. $1 million. So again, Joe Biden in another country, in Ukraine, where his son is making millions of dollars illegally, because he's not even a registered foreign agent, any of that stuff. He's making millions of dollars. His father steps in, and once he sees that his son and the company his son is getting all this money from is being investigated, steps in and leverages the money coming from the United States, the aid coming from the United States, in order to get that prosecutor fired. Now, during a call with the President Poroshenko in May of 2016, Joe Biden mentioned the Ukrainian prosecutor situation, Viktor Shokin. Hunter Biden was also copied in on another email on June 14, 2016, regarding his father's official schedule for the day. The following day, Joe Biden held a meeting with Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman. Not Zelensky, but Vladimir Groysman, and announced a new package of aid to Ukraine. So they got rid of the prosecutor that was causing trouble for Hunter Biden, and magically all this aid comes. Hunter Biden was also included on an email detailing his father's schedule for the day of that meeting, and just 5 days earlier, Sherwin, then Hunter Biden's business partner, visited the White House to meet with Joe Biden's office, according to visitors' log. Other than the few days surrounding the Poroshenko call in May and Ukrainian Prime Minister meeting in 2016, Hunter Biden does not appear to be looped into more emails about his father's schedule cards or what appear to be internal memos detailing the vice president's busy schedule. Biden spent a significant amount of time during the end of 2015 and the first half of 2016 on Ukrainian policy. In early 2015, he visited Ukraine and delivered a speech to the Ukrainian Rada, where he argued that the office of the general prosecutor desperately needs reform. But Viktor Shokin was considered a very good prosecutor. If you look at before that, he was considered a very, very good prosecutor. But magically, once he started looking into the company that Hunter Biden is making millions of dollars at, now he's not a good prosecutor anymore. He's terrible. He sucks. And they need reform. Three days after that speech, which was aimed at then prosecutor Viktor Shokin, Sherwin visited the White House, according to visitors' logs. The House Oversight Committee's request to the National Archives included all drafts of that December 9, 2015 speech in Ukraine. Wow. In an email between Hunter Biden and Robin Ware, another Joe Biden pseudonym, Hunter Biden appears to press for a friend, John McGrail, to land the job he had wanted 2 years earlier, imploring his father to consider McGrail before you fill that position. And Joe Biden says, "Call me right away." By the following page, according to his LinkedIn page, McGrail had indeed landed that job as a deputy counsel in the vice president's office and was later promoted to counsel. Just standard cronyism. Other emails on Hunter Biden's laptop show Joe Biden communicated frequently with his family using the aliases to offer encouragement and to let them know how much he missed them on his travels. Now that's not that big of a deal. Now, in one heartwarming set of exchanges, Joe Biden told his son that an article about his 2014 ejection from the Navy Reserves over cocaine use was about as good as it could have been, and encouraged his son to move forward. Joe Biden notoriously has been the biggest anti-drug warrior this country's had, especially on the Democratic side. So the amount of leniency that he has shown to his children, while at the same time, people like those walking around here in Gary, Indiana, have gotten life sentences, double life, for what Hunter Biden and other people close to them have done. it just sort of once again shows you the sort of political hypocrisy of the elite class in this country. Joe Biden has often spoken of his closeness with his family, and Hunter Biden has remained at his father's side for official events and trips, even as his controversies caused headaches during Biden's presidency. But the evidence that Joe Biden had much more involvement in his son's business affairs than he previously acknowledged has continued to mount more in recent weeks. An IRS whistleblower this spring brought forth evidence that investigators had compiled over several years about the extent of Joe Biden's role in the business, including an FBI interview with a former business partner who said that discussions were had about cutting Joe Biden in on a Chinese business deal if he decided against the 2020 presidential run, and Joe Biden's willingness to stop by dinners to help his son close deals. Archer, another former business partner, told the House Oversight Committee last month that Hunter Biden would frequently put Joe Biden on speakerphone during meetings with his foreign business associates, including some from the Ukrainian company, and confirmed that Joe Biden stopped by in person to multiple business dinners. In addition, emails, bank records show that James Biden, this is Joe Biden's brother, also earned substantial amounts of money from foreign sources while Joe Biden was vice president, undermining the talking point that Hunter Biden's business was completely isolated from the Biden family. Like I said, this is just sort of standard political corruption that we have sort of become immune to, mostly because the mainstream media wants you to believe that Donald Trump is somehow uniquely corrupt and evil, and that, you know, somehow Joe Biden is a contrast. And he's not. He's not a contrast. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the same guy practically. Whether it's grabbing women inappropriately, completely enabling their families to cash in off their names, the hypocrisy of their policies, they are basically the same guy. The only real contrast is who is running is Brother Cornel West. That's about it. That's why I support him. That's why I support Brother Cornel. He's the only real true contrast. But one thing I did find hilarious was that CNN actually had to admit, they finally had to admit that Donald Trump was right about Joe Biden's son making all this money in other countries. But they sound very tortured about it.
Glenn Kessler from the Washington Post had a fact check about Joe Biden from earlier this month, noting that Hunter Biden admitted in court in July that he was in fact paid substantial sums from Chinese companies. Kessler wrote, Hunter Biden reported nearly $2.4 million in income in 2017 and $2.2 million in income in 2018, most of which came from Chinese or Ukrainian interests. But this directly goes against what Joe Biden said in the debate in 2020 with Donald Trump. Take a listen.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China.
None of that is true. He made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
that is simply
and various
not
other places.
True.
So it's from two different debates, but, I mean, Trump was right. I mean, he did make a fortune from China, and Joe Biden was wrong. I don't know that he was lying about it. He might not have been told by Hunter, but this blind spot is a problem.
You know, you see how they present it as a blind spot? Again, it's a blind spot, just like Hunter's drug problem is a blind spot. When you spend years ruining millions of people's lives, especially black people's lives, right, with the war on drugs, and then you let your son and your daughter, because Joe Biden has a drug addict daughter as well, who actually wrote in her diary that her father used to shower with her as a young girl, which is another story the media has not covered, or that Hunter has Joe saved in his phone as Pedo Peter. Again, these are things that the corporate liberal media won't cover. But when you see the type of hypocrisy, that's what gets me about all this. It's the hypocrisy, and it's the lenience that we show elite people when there's people walking around here in Gary, Indiana, who, if they had that level of leniency, they wouldn't have lost college scholarships, they wouldn't have lost jobs, they wouldn't have lost families, they wouldn't have lost their homes. But we allow all the leniency in the world to people who have everything. And that's what I was talking about last week when we were talking about Trump last week. These people are so used to getting away with everything. Everything, because you have people like this on CNN who are willing to make excuses for them. I guess, well, Trump's not going to get excuses made for him by CNN. Fox News will probably make excuses for him, or Newsmax or something, but CNN will make excuses for Biden. Okay, they both have this sort of cheering sections that will make excuses for their corruption for things that if I did them as a black man here in the city of Gary, or just any black man did it anywhere in America, we'd be spending 10, 20 years in jail. It's this level of hypocrisy. And that's why I so much advocate for political change. We need a political revolution here in this country, the United States of America. Please, folks, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to get into the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. Oh, before I go to break, let me say that those last two stories, I want to give credit to Newsweek and the Washington Examiner for that information on on Joe Biden's pseudonyms. Oh, so thanks to them. We'll be right back after these.